Hello again, Adrian here from Sofeast, and I'm joined by Kate, who is our head of supply chain management, and we're talking about HS and HTS codes today in this little bonus podcast. Hi, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Adrian. Nice to be invited here again.
Yeah, well, the reason I've asked you to just record this one just briefly is because we recently published a blog post which is quite detailed about HS and HTS codes. And these codes, well, I want to get into why they're important from you and what they're used for. And maybe you can give an example of, what can go wrong or right when you're selecting these codes. And then I'll, in the show notes, leave the link to that post so everybody listening can learn even more. But if you're exporting products from China or wherever, these codes, you're going to need to know about them, right?
Yes, definitely. So HS code is a harmonized commodity. Basically, it's a coding system for the products that you are importing from one country to another one. You might, if you have read our article, you might have noticed that we have HS code and we have HTS codes. So basically, to cut it short, HTS is a system that is used for United States, whereas HS code you would normally use in the European Union, Europe or UK. So that's the main difference. Otherwise, they are quite similar. I think they also differ in a number of digits, but that's not important. So if we talk about in principle, why do you need HS code, why it's important, and things like that. So this system is used by customs to classify a product. And so based on this code, you will know how much tariff you would pay, how much duty you would pay once you are importing from one country to another. So this will end up in your final cost, as it comprises from your manufacturing price, from your logistics price, your delivery cost, and then finally the duty cost that you would pay at the border once your goods come to the country you are importing to. So that's why it is very important to have it right, as this will impact your margin, final price your customers would pay for your product. I think how you can control that. So if we talk about China, usually suppliers would advise HS code they use, or forwarders can help sometimes, logistic forwarders can help sometimes to allocate the code. However, it is important that you are aware of the codes and you speak to customs brokers and make sure you have the right code on your customs declaration, because this will affect your business and your costs. And usually, HS code you can see it on customs declaration, so on all the customs documents. So, as to give some examples, I guess our listeners from the US know it too well in the recent years. So we've all heard about Trump tariff, which were imposed in 2018, and this had a huge impact on the level of imports from China to the US. And so right now, China is only a source of only 18% of total US goods imports since this tariff implementation. And in comparison, the rest of the world is now 38% higher than pre-trade war levels in level of imports to the US. So that impacts a lot. And so Trump administration imposed 25% tariff on approximately 250 billion of imports from China. So this is huge. And we did have a sample of this. So I think in 2021, like we had a customer who who was doing some kind of gift boxes, the boxes that are filled with different things, kind of subscription box model. And those boxes, they do have subscription box models. They do have a lot of packaging, so like box itself and then different inserts and then some blisters and things like that. And customer shipped it to the US. He didn't check that packaging material was in the list of the Trump tax. And he ended up paying, so basically, I think container total price of goods, value of goods was about $20,000 US, and he ended up paying about $5,000 for tariff, for 25% tariff, plus the crazy shipping costs to the United States at that time during the COVID, which was also above $20,000 US. So he ended up that his packaging costed him a fortune. He could have produced it in the US, even in the US. I'm not talking about Mexico or India or Vietnam or other countries. Even in the US, it would be cheaper for them to produce it over there than shipping from China with at that level of tariffs and logistics. So this is important basically to know when you're starting a business, to understand which, especially if you're in the US. So apart from that, you should be aware of which duty level you have. If it's US, you need to know which commodities fall under the Trump list. And maybe for those, you should think of some diversification to see, depending on your volume, of course, but it might make sense to have it produced in the other countries instead, or see if you can avoid somehow paying, like seeing if you can have a different HS code to not to fall into the tariffs. This is also possible. So I have another example. Just recently, actually, we had a power switch shipment to the US with our customer, and normally the duty is 8% for those, but we could manage to pick an HS code that has 0% duty. Because basically there are two closed HS codes. One is 0%, but it needs CCC report. So this is sort of kind of CE certification we have in the EU. So this kind of compliance that you need in China, and customer didn't have it. The other one did not require to have this one, but then had an 88% of duty. However, our logistic expert managed to call to the customs and to explain that the voltage is under 36 volt, and so then we don't need to provide CCC report, because she knew that. Like, I would never know that under certain voltage for power switch CCC is not needed. So she managed to persuade the customs and to provide like basically a letter, and this allowed her to use other HS codes. So it's important to speak to a customs broker before you're shipping your goods to make sure you check all the options, because for your suppliers it's not on them, so they might not care. They know they had some reference from before. They had some previous customers who shipped it under this HS code, and they would use the same because they know it works. But they don't have really an interest to explore further. So that's always good to double check that.
Wow, that's very interesting. Okay, so these codes, they're really important part of your research. First of all, when you're deciding what you're going to use in terms of materials and components and packaging, and then secondly, when you're ready to ship, if you're careful, you might be able to find a code that's going to help you to reduce or avoid duties or tariffs completely. So that's been a really interesting little explanation of these codes. So thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everyone. So hope it's useful. My advice would be always to double check with customs clearance specialist and don't just trust your supplier on the code they suggest. As it may be the right one, but you'd want to double check and see if you can get better options still.
Nice. That's great. And if you want to go even deeper into this topic, check out the blog post, and I'll leave the link to that in the show notes. Thanks once again for listening, everybody, and thanks for coming on, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.